Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Retail Tales. This is a podcast which is exclusively focused on discussing all things AI across the retail value chain. I'm Saurabh, and I'm your host for this podcast. Today's episode is very special for me. It's special because I'm getting an opportunity to not just talk to a long-term mentor of mine, but also share some of her insights with all of you. I've had the pleasure of witnessing her brilliance in action so many times in my career. Her journey, her passion, her extensive knowledge about the retail fabric, the retail DNA has always been truly inspirational. She describes herself as a girl raised on a farm who landed her dream job at 22 and launched a 20 plus years career as a corporate lawyer and senior retail executive advisor. She's a mom, a wife, a multi-sport athlete, and a side hustler in real estate. I won't steal any more thunder from her in describing what she's currently working on, but I'd be remiss if I don't mention this. She's also a fellow podcast host. Her podcast is called Exponential Everyday, and it's also available on Apple and Spotify. So don't forget to go and check it out. Now, while I've learned so much in my career from this trailblazing leader, I'm thrilled to have all of you listen to some of her perspectives today. Please join me as I welcome the founder and CEO of IQRush to the show, a friend, a mentor, and an inspiring leader in the retail industry, Tracie Kambies. Tracie, welcome to the Retail Tales.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. What an introduction. I don't think I'm that deserving of that introduction. But
you completely are.
I appreciate it. It's so great to be here. I was thankful you asked me and very grateful to be able to do it.
Thank you, Tracie. Let's begin with your journey so far. I know I shared a few things already in my introduction, but why don't you take the listeners through your background, your experiences, and your overall journey?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. I mean, and you can tell me how far. I won't go so far back to the farm, but
you can. All yours.
I would say the only thing I would take it back to the farm is I kind of grew up in the retail space, is what I like to call it. The first sense of farm to table before it was farm to table. I grew up literally in the middle of a peach orchard. My grandparents had orchards around us. My dad was also a farmer and also had his own business of a small business owner as a crop duster, which was required, as part of being in the agriculture community. It was really interesting. I learned about really interesting concepts of agriculture and technology at a young age, but also about retail because my grandmother ran a roadside farm stand selling her peaches, so I got to understand a little bit about retail early on and, just by living and being around family. But
from the ground up, right?
Yeah, from the ground up, literally. Yeah. So, but it gave me a deep appreciation, not just of hard work and a work ethic, but just like it was just so much more that went into it than just putting seeds in the ground and harvesting them. And there was a whole process around it. And as I got older and in the high school and, learning about economics and things of that nature, then that really started to kick in and understanding, okay, now this is how it really all fits together. I had all these real life experiences and against things that I was learning about in school. And, but then I went out to college and I, not having been overly exposed to technology at a young age outside of just more engineering type stuff like farm equipment and things like that. And first sets of computer programs that were being run for my dad's business, watching the commodity price charts and stuff that were still on like black and green screens. I got to see some of that, Yeah. It was like having the first Commodore 64,
Oh my God.
Kind of stuff. Or whatever he had. He had some sort of Windows machine, I think, with like the first generation Windows or something right after the Commodore. But, it was also watching, the prices come out on the fax machine on a regular basis. It was really interesting, all those things. But I got off to school and I really fell in love with, wanted to learn computer science, did a few of those classes, but then quickly found my way into management information systems and databases and learning like that from the ground up, and from the Terry College of Business at the University of Georgia. And through that program, I got to get exposed to consulting and like project-based work. And, started interviewing right out of college, or towards the tail end of college, and immediately went and started working at EY, was offered a few other positions and interviewed a couple of places, but EY offered me a role, and I took that role, and it just fit. It was just very interesting. It just fit. And one of my first projects was at Barilla Pasta Company. Like it was right out of like, they used to send people off to like Oracle training and JD Edwards training and SAP training. And I ended up getting put into the JD Edwards world. So at the time, but also had some custom development stuff that I was also a part of that practice. And so I kind of got put in a role to build like custom data conversion programs for, moving data from old legacy mainframe systems, or creating new data from data that was literally being like put on a floppy disk and sent over the ocean from Italy to the US.
Yeah.
To help them stand up their first manufacturing plant and their distribution centers to start in just outside in Lincolnshire, Illinois, outside of Chicago. And it was really cool. I got to spend a lot of time there learning that whole side of retail, from product development, product creation, product manufacturing, to putting it on the shelves in the grocery stores.
Yeah.
Being able to see Barilla Pasta, this company that I was working for that was importing pasta for a long period of time, straight on the shelves, was really cool. To be able to do that. And then I spent off and on time doing a lot of different things in and out of retail and consumer products, and did some things with short stint and in health, in the healthcare life sciences space, and then I was at EY for 5 years, almost exclusively in technology and doing data conversions and data architectures, kind of plugins, and how to make systems integrations really work for these big ERP systems and data warehouses and old legacy systems. And then I was working on a project, happened to get on a local project in Atlanta, working for Coca-Cola, and was working in an adjacent team with Deloitte, and started meeting some of the Deloitte team because we ended up having things that would cross over between the two projects.
I'm glad you did.
After I got to know a few Deloitte folks at the account, and they recruited me, and it was around the same time that EY was selling off their consulting practice to Capgemini. And, that was here I was, I kind of went in naively thinking like, I'm like my grandfather. He stayed at a company for like 40 years, he did different roles in it. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to stay at this one company. There's so many ways to grow, blah, blah, blah. And, and then this, the SEC mandate came down, and EY was one of the first ones to kind of sell off. And so when that happened, it gave me this opportunity to really start talking to people about why they love Deloitte, what was going to happen with Deloitte and their consulting practice. And at that time, it was right around the time, or I think 2003, in early 2003, Deloitte had kind of come out. They're not splitting, right? They weren't going to split the practices. And so I, at that time, had started talking to a few people, and, had a few interviews in the Atlanta office, and sure enough, got offered the job. And it was EY's project, Capgemini's project with Coca-Cola was wrapping up, and Deloitte was actually going to be taking over that work, and they were trying to consolidate vendors. And so I stayed on that project for just a little bit longer, but it made more sense for me to kind of join Deloitte and kind of get off on a different path and start doing. So I did. And, 18 years later, I was I was still with Deloitte come 2020, which was an amazing time. And that's why we got to meet.
Yeah, I mean, and that's impressive. Look, I knew of your story at a very high level, but these details are just gold dust. So thank you for sharing. And it's impressive as well. And something that you've said, like in your description, I really picked up one thing, your consistency with starting from ground up from when you were a farm girl to when you started your experimentation with computers, then learning on the job at EY and then with Deloitte, and then now you're starting up with your, so that's been consistent, which is great. And you and I have had a couple of discussions with in the past about the whole startup journey and continuing to drive your passion in the retail space. But would you mind sharing your motivation to start IQRush with the listeners, and how does it help with e-commerce?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So my partner, Todd Paris, and I, when we decided we were going to do this, we started talking about, like, I really had this vision. When I left Deloitte, I was thinking I was taking a sabbatical. So I did another stint for 18 months after that, but that was not really something I had planned, but it gave me a different view of the world and a new network. So that was great. But I would had this thought of, like, gosh, I really want to do something on my own. I always have seen this gap in the market for the mid and small size retailers. So, and brands. So, like, think of, and honestly, like, when Deloitte Digital, when we started growing Deloitte Digital at Deloitte, that was one of the things that I saw as we would acquire these smaller companies who served both small brands and some mid-size and maybe a few big brands too. And they were sort of coming up, and I was like, what would happen to the smaller brands that really need help? And then, the whole fact that there are women who start brands in retail and e-commerce and digital native brands, like, they don't get as much funding, they don't get as much support, and having diverse brands and being able to support brands that are built on diversity, and support and, like, really cater to the diverse population that we do have. And how do we raise that up and find a way to, like, accelerate and use both technology and the things that we're able to deploy to complex business strategies, but make them fit for small brands and smaller businesses owned by women and minorities. And so that was where our head started. And then we started looking at the space, and e-commerce it's still always been a growth opportunity. We see more and more of that continuing to happen. Not that stores are ever going to go away, but this opportunity still kind of exists for people to start small in that space. And because they can start small, you can pick your product, build your product, launch it digitally, launch it in e-commerce, and then you can grow into stores, or maybe you do your own small store. But I think that's where we started to really look at it and say, okay, well, what's the biggest place e-commerce is happening right now?
Yeah.
And what's that biggest e-commerce location and platform that is getting the most volume for consumers, and it exposes smaller brands to consumers. And so we sort of looked at that and investigated it a little bit, and met a few sellers that have literally started brands from ground zero to growing it to a $20 to $25 million annual revenue. Some of these brands are small, or they have multiple brands within a portfolio. And so we spent some time with these folks, and then we also, like, took a class of how to be a seller, how to be a better Amazon seller, how to be a better marketplace seller. Like, there are classes and teachers and people who have done it well, and you can, like, you join a mastermind kind of group with them, and you learn from them. And so we listened a lot, and we learned what they do, and we learned about the seller's journey. And I would say we're still learning because it's very complex and it changes every day. But that was what really fueled those two things coming together, is like that passion for small businesses and trying to figure out how to help women and minority businesses in this space and build a solution using the technology, knowledge, and problem solving skills that we both had, having Todd having come from Microsoft and done a startup before, and me having applied analytics in the retail space, and then just having a passion for helping small businesses and figuring out what can we do to bring those two things together. It's kind of really what fueled it.
Got it. No,
and got us to where we are right now.
No, of course. And that's a journey worth taking, right? I mean, like I was saying earlier as well, when we were not recording this, it's the first few steps that matter. And as long as you can take those first few steps, everything then becomes, kind of a path that you're already following on. I know you have advised some of the most prominent retail executives in your career. In fact, you and I have had some common clients as well. In fact, let me tell you this. At NRF in January this year, I ran into one such executive who's now a part of a different organization, but he fondly spoke about our experience of working with him and his team a few years ago. So that was a pleasant surprise, actually. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I love hearing that.
But given your grasp on the retail industry, Tracie, and your experience of driving, some of the biggest digital transformations, for some of the biggest retail clients, I'm curious to hear about your perspectives on the frenzy of AI and generative AI in the market, especially for some of the, small and mid-sized retailers. I mean, big retail firms have deep pockets and appetite to experiment with generative AI. They have access to the best talent out there, to the best capabilities out there. But what should retail SMBs do?
Well, I think it's a great question. The retail SMBs really need to think about where they, most of the time they're focused on product, getting to the customer and meeting the customer where they're at. And they don't have a lot of dollars, so they have to prioritize those dollars. But I think it's important for them to take a step back and really look at, okay, well, where can I leverage some of the latest and greatest tech to actually, where I think I might need a role or I need to hire someone full-time. Maybe I actually need to hire someone part-time because I can get this part set up and use generative AI, or use a solution that is now leveraging, an automation. Maybe it's doing more RPA type work, or maybe it's truly using generative AI that can help benefit them in the end. I think about all the small brands out there that could leverage the power of AI for content development and evergreening content that can, help support their marketing initiatives. Automating, their email marketing. That's another great area that small brands can really, without a ton of money. There are small AI-backed driven little content generation engines out there today that small retailers and small brands can really leverage and utilize to, I think, gain a little bit of automation, but also more optimization within their business without dropping a ton of money. Yeah. And I think looking at that priority, I think even more important now for some of these brands and retailers is really like focus on your product and getting your product out the door. Focus on your sales, getting your sales out the door. If you can afford to expand or you're getting good, traction with some, placing your product in stores, sometimes it doesn't really work out well for the small retailer or small brand. I know a small fashion brand that I love very dearly. And we were talking recently, and I was talking to her about how is she thinking about her prioritization? Where should she invest in some technology that will benefit her versus going and hiring a full-time person, or maybe hire that full-time person and then deploy a smaller footprint of technology to support you, or go and launch a store for a short period of time and test that market. And it's been really great to kind of be a part of that. And I think helping people and thinking about how generative AI and AI in general, or technology opportunities and what the landscape of technology and how it's changing using AI, embedding, just think about how Microsoft is embedding Copilot in everything and the benefits that people are getting from just having that AI capability embedded in Word or embedded in PowerPoint, and being able to generate really interesting graphics to support a 3-bullet, concept that you've created. It's those types of things, I think, that small businesses and, solutions like Canva and Fireflies and all of these
I was about to say.
that are out there that can really support generating content at a different speed than what it used to be, and at a different price point. And I think that's where small businesses are really going to leverage it. And which is why that's why IQRush has been focused heavily on how do we use this technology to truly benefit a seller, and can we solve the right problems for a seller? Because they change so frequently.
Mm.
So how do we get ahead of it? And I feel like we may be slightly behind in some areas where we might be slightly ahead in others. And so it's hard to balance that as a technology development company where you're trying to there's some core things that are needed that might be considered more table stakes, but then you want to keep experimenting and using the next thing and making that solution, enabling it so you can plug in the new tech as soon as it arrives and you've experimented with it and you've tested it and it still gives you the right results so that you can get it out to that customer and that retailer, that brand, so that they can actually gain benefit from it. Because ultimately that's what it's all about.
Yeah. And would you also say that, the luxury of being nimble is something that these big box retailers don't have? Like, everybody keeps talking about fast fail mentality, but it doesn't really play out that well when you're talking to these enterprise big retailers versus maybe the SMBs are better off in that sense. Like, they're much more flexible, much nimbler, and fast fail really happens.
Yeah. Well, they don't have time to waste on, let's keep trying, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the other piece is they can't really afford to do that. You have to be able to pivot pretty fast when something is not going the way you thought it was going to go. And so I think that is what the big difference is. I think when large retailers get to the size, the big brands or the big retailers get to a certain size, they have to contend because there's so much expectation from the street, particularly if they've gone public, right? Even if they were private, they're still being looked at because they're a huge brand. But the expectation of performance, right, and balancing cost and growth, is a critical balance you have to strike. And so you have to kind of, in the big guys, they can experiment at a smaller scale, but it costs so much more to experiment because it costs so much more to take that experiment and plug it in, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so much in the backside that it requires. And I think that's where, if these companies, I know this is one of the things Nike has been so good at is trying to experiment, but I know that they've had some struggles and they even talk about them. Some of the acquisitions that they've made have worked out. Some have been really spectacular. And then you see it translated into how the product is being delivered or how their digital sites are coming together and that sort of thing. And it's really cool to watch these acquisitions that they've made really come to life in the product, the marketing, and what they're doing in the space. But then it's also interesting to hear kind of what their goals and ambitions are and how they change them, and then what they're doing internally and their announcements that they make publicly to talk about how they have to change the organization.
Correct.
And that's what it requires on the big scale. Whereas in a small, mid-sized brand, you can make changes a heck of a lot faster.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I agree.
Sometimes it works out in their favor for being small like that. Sometimes it doesn't.
Well, then that's a point. But even if it doesn't, they have a nimbler kind of an ecosystem built around it, so they can fail fast and then move on really quickly.
Yeah.
Let me, if you don't mind, let me ask you a question which is a little bit more philosophical. What's your hope for AI in the retail industry? As a consumer, as a former retail executive advisor, as a business owner in the retail space, what do you hope for?
Wow, that's a great question. I really hope that AI can level the playing field for some brands and businesses out there. Honestly, I see there are the behemoths like Amazon really owns a ton. Shopify's getting bigger, Etsy's getting bigger, Walmart.com is getting bigger. But I hope AI can actually level the playing field for the small and mid-sized brands that are being sold on these platforms, and that these are the platforms that are getting them to the consumers. So there's a mutually beneficial relationship, but I also feel like some of these marketplaces are, and I wouldn't say as much on the Etsy front, although they're a business in and of themselves. So you're seeing the models start to change and evolve, and the fee structures change, and the structure of how they can integrate and what they get, what is supported and what isn't, because they're still trying to make a dollar too. But it's what started out as very altruistic can sometimes end up being, more cutthroat. And so I would love to see AI really start to level the playing field and make it almost as if they really didn't even have to think about selling anymore.
I don't think you're talking about IQRush. I think you're talking about a revolution.
Maybe. Maybe that's what it is. But for us to even scratch the small surface of being able to help accomplish that, I think would be huge, right? I even think about it like I have an idea for a product and I'm like, I don't have time for another product. Like I can't launch my own kitchen utensil, that thing that I came up with, an idea in my kitchen when I was cooking the other day. And I was like, I don't have time to do that. But if I were to do that, how quickly could I do it?
Yeah.
And, do the research, look at other competitors, and be able to say, what would be my personas and how would what would I need to do with purchase intent to understand that? How would I shape my listings for these different platforms? I mean, that's what IQRush is really trying to get out there, is not to do what the other solutions out there that do some of that. We are literally trying to say, there's data out there to harvest. We want you to launch your product. We want to help you manage after you launch it and then come up with the next idea and the next idea and launch and launch and launch and just build your brand. And that's almost like sellerless selling. But, I think just that revolution is kind of coming. I don't know.
I'm telling you, I did not use that word lightly. Like I meant it. It does sound like a revolution. Look, if you know me, which I know you do, but you know that I want to continue talking to you and continue to pick your brain. But we are coming close to the end of this episode. Before we wrap up though, any parting thoughts or advice to retailers or retail executives who are listening, or retail enthusiasts for that matter, as they make progress on their AI journeys?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I have seen and learned over the 25 years I've been doing this, and particularly as a co-founder and startup right now, is that you learn so much through experimentation. And I think there have been a lot of retailers who have experimented and taken risk, and brands that do that on a daily basis. But I think with AI and generative AI in particular, I think you have to think about small experiments with big and look at the impact that can make and be willing to scrap an idea. But, failure is always an option, particularly if you're a big retailer. I think you have more opportunities to fail. There's safer landing and safe nets all over the place, I think, if you play it right. But I think I would encourage more experimentation and focus on the prioritization of those problems that you're going to experiment against, and building that list together, and then really thinking about purposely getting to okay, how is this outcome going to help me in the end when I get through that experiment?
Well, thank you, Tracie. I'm incredibly grateful that you said yes to be on the show. I'm so glad that you could take out time and share your thoughts with my listeners. Whenever I talk to you, there are several moments of learning for me, and I'm sure it was the same for, a lot of listeners today as well. So thank you again.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. I enjoy talking to you. It's always good catching up.
Thank you. For the folks who are interested in learning more and looking to get connected with Tracie, please reach out to her on LinkedIn. And again, her podcast is called Exponential Everyday, so go check it out. And with that, it's a wrap on this episode of the Retail Tales. Thanks for listening. Here's me, Saurabh, signing off. If you like the content, don't forget to follow this show and keep learning a thing or two about retail AI. You can always follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to this show on Spotify or Apple. Join me in the next episode of the Retail Tales, a show which is exclusively focused on exploring all things AI across the retail value chain. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay curious.